Hi, I am Nick Daly, and you are now watching the MMA Conspiracy Hour with Todd Atkins and Miguel Iturrate for conspiracies, combat sports, and so much more. You better stay tuned, or I'll come find you. Night Queen style.
All right, this is Todd Atkins, and we are back with another MMA Conspiracy Hour with Mystic Miguel Iturrate. And as always, we want you to like the video and subscribe. Just hit the button down there. And so today we're going to talk about Dana White joining the board of directors for META. I think our show is the kind of show that can talk about this kind of stuff in the MMA space. And Miguel, I just kind of wanted to give you your opening shots at it.
I think um I think the move actually has little to do with MMA. I mean, Dana might have some, uh ability to maybe expand their social media grasp. I think Meta owns Instagram also, and they've got a couple of outlets like that. Facebook, I don't think is that great an outlet for MMA social media. If you follow people or you're a fan of people, I think they limit people to like 5,000 or something like that. So whatever is going on there, I think Dana's thinking beyond MMA, and I think at this point he's got to be getting close to a billionaire. Um, and I think this is one of those moves where hey, if you can get a job or you can get a position where they're going to give you meta stock, you're not going to be losing money on that. You know what I mean? So I think this is a situation where the rich get richer. I think Zuckerberg's motivations might be a little more insidious. I think at the end of the day, with the new government coming in, and maybe we'll delve into a little bit of politics and stuff, but I think with the new government coming in, and you know, Zuckerberg has been in front of the Senate, in front of the House of Representatives and stuff. He's been accused of certain censorships in terms of COVID and other things that they did not allow. The spread on social media that they were actually censoring some stuff, and this might be a way to avoid a deeper scrutiny of it. Um, Trump is maybe going to come in very aggressive, and there are going to be certain people that I think he might pick on to make an example of, and I think might be an attempt by Zuckerberg to not be on that list. You know what I mean? I don't know who's on that list. And we have no proof that Trump is going to actually do any of the things that they've said they're going to do. He said he was going to prosecute Hillary. There's a great clip where he's actually in the room with Hillary, and they're at one of these dinners with these people, and Trump can be funny sometimes. I'm sure you've seen the clip where and Hillary's laughing at the end of it, laughing hard. He goes, I just wanted to let people know I was in the back and Hillary bumped into me. She stepped on my foot or something. And she looked at me and she said, "Pardon me." You know what I mean? So it's like I think he never went after her aggressively. He said in debates and stuff he should be in jail, and he was tough on her. But I think a lot of the stuff he says is that aggressiveness, but he's not going to follow up on it. But Zuckerberg, maybe there are going to be some other, like I think, for example, um, if Biden doesn't and again we're getting into politics, but if Biden doesn't pardon Fauci, I think Fauci may very well be facing charges because he's a guy that a lot of people across the country blame for the whole COVID, and they say he invested money in the lab in China and stuff like that. So I think um, you know, Zuckerberg definitely allowed some information about the COVID to be skewed in some way, shape, or form. And he recently also fired all of the people that do, fact checking and things like that, and is going more with a community version, like similar to X and Elon Musk. So all of a sudden, um, this freedom of speech kind of vibe is coming across Facebook, and I think Zuckerberg is maybe looking to avoid uh, real scrutiny at what he's been doing for the last few years. Which is amassing a ton of money and kowtowing to the government. So he kowtowed to the last administration so that they wouldn't, affect him. And now he's switching over so that he's now kowtowing to the new administration, even though it's a complete reversal. That looks to be like what he does is he does whatever will avoid him scrutiny so that he can also continue to pile up his money. And Dana's another guy. Dana doesn't have Mark Zuckerberg money or Zuckerberg money, but he'd like to, And Dana's a good ally to have if you're switching over to this new people. Trump had Dana do introductions at the Republican convention and things like that. Dana's on record saying that he finds politics disgusting. He doesn't like the you know being involved in that. But this is Dana joining this board is more of a political move than a move that's like going to enhance the UFC. I don't think the UFC can really, you know, I mean, it might get a little bigger on and on social media and stuff like that, but they already have a good grip on social media.
Right, but this is something we were talking about offline. I didn't mention that, but now that you bring that up, what I had said, you take away all the fact checking, bring in this illusion of freedom of speech. That's the perfect kind of smokescreen to quell some anti-UFC sentiment. You know, Dana can earn some favor with Zuckerberg, and no one will care if they squash some anti-UFC stories. No one will care about that. They're not trying to mess with an election by doing that. But you're also right. They could help UFC grow on social media in ways that they haven't
Yeah,
figured out.
even that. Look, I think the
Because they could
situation is,
manipulate algorithms to help that.
yeah, but what I think you need to take into account there is that Dana has for 20 years been working on a stranglehold.
Mm-hmm.
So, like anti-UFC sentiment, where exactly is the anti-UFC sentiment coming from? Guys like,
Antitrust.
okay, okay, yeah, if if the State Department is somebody's looking at that, well, how is the lawsuit going? By the way,
Well, they had the, I think the hearing to, if I want to, the hearing to actually accept the settlement on the first one, I think is going to be in February, if I'm not mistaken.
okay.
Um, they have to, you know, they had a period of time where they can put in if they don't like this, that, and the other. Um, I think it'll be in February, and then Johnson. I don't know when that'll happen, but Johnson could do more damage because that actually has some change to business practices and some fighter protections in that lawsuit that the first one didn't.
Like I said, we'll see. I don't have a lot. The UFC's behavior is such. The bottom line is from the first settlement to the second settlement, they put in a little more money. And I know it sounds like a lot of money, to me and you. And obviously, if I got, a little bit of a payout, something like anywhere of a small percentage of that would be outstanding for me because I'm just a average Joe, you know what I mean? But first settlement, not accepted. Second settlement, you know, we'll see in February. Bottom line is and we're talking about how rich Dana is. Dana could pay that out of pocket, both settlements.
Right, but the
Maybe
change to
even
business
maybe
practices is something he can't. That's where the real damage is done.
yeah. But here's the thing: is I really have no faith that somebody's going to be able to change their business practices because just
Especially with
addressing,
Trump in their corner.
yeah,
That'll be
and
helpful.
just addressing the problem is, and we pointed this out in other podcasts here, is the problem is that this is just a fighter lawsuit. So it only deals with the contracts of the fighters And the bottom line is they're going to be able to point to the fact that, you know, when they started, everybody was making 2 and 2 in the door, and now they're making 10 and 10. So they've actually literally raised. You can't find another industry that's given 500% increase in pay in that period of time. So they're going to be able to use semantics like that to protect themselves and to show that they're actually doing the best they can for the fighters.
But the revenue
Um,
share is horrible in comparison to every other league.
yes, I agree with that, and we know that, but there's no written law that says that you've got to do 50-50 like the NBA or the other people done. There's been a lot of negotiations to get the NFL and the NBA to that level out there, and there's been a lot of work done from the 70s till now on there. So Dana could say, yeah, maybe in another 30 years it'll go that way. But right now it's got to be this way because, we're expanding into other markets and you don't know where they spend money and stuff like that. So, like I said, and with their lawyers, I think that the proper way for this to have gone would have been for them to start scrutinizing not only what they did to the fighters, but what they did to other promotions, what they did to grassroots industries like t-shirt salesmen and newspaper salesmen and reporters and websites and things like that, where they literally crushed everything. And that's the true nature of a monopoly. And nobody is looking at that. Even this lawsuit, you know, um, when we interviewed Bob Mazy, he he said that he was aware of some of that and that there was some truth to when we asked him about that stuff, specifically the case of Joe Golden in Full Contact Fighter, that those people, Monty Cox, the management people, in those cases, that they very well could be victims, but they're not part of the lawsuit.
Right.
And so nobody's even looking at the true depth of what they do. And on top of that, Maisie sort of said he doesn't, he hasn't taken into account something that I firmly believe, and that is, again, the high roll. They're gambling people. At the end of the day, he comes from the Fertitas, who are gambling people.
Mm-hmm.
And where are the high roller bettors? Who is handling the high roller bettors?
Yep.
Because in the old days, for example, if you look at the famous 1910 or whatever the date was, 1912 or whatever the date was of the Jack Johnson Jim Jeffries fight, um, the way the betting worked on that, and the fighters could actually bet on themselves also, right? But the way the betting would be taken care of there is that people would put their money, a person who's trustworthy would hold the money, especially for the fighters and the people involved with the production if they were betting on it. They would hold the money. So I'm betting against you. Me and you are betting, $1,000 each back in those days, which is a lot of money, or whatever, and somebody would hold it. And that person holding that money would take a small percentage or a percentage. So now, when you're talking about $1 million bets, even if you're able to take a percentage, maybe who knows? Can we possibly be dealing with $20 million bets? What if uh, the Prince of Saudi Arabia wants to make a bet? You got to match him up with somebody who's going to be on the other end, and I believe that there's going to be a Rolodex of people. You know who those guys are if you're in the business. You know what I mean? Um, so yeah, I think unless the full extent of everything they do comes out in a court, then I think that they're going to get away scot free. And even though maybe the Johnson lawsuit is a little more dangerous, at the same time, most of the fighters in the Johnson lawsuit signed a much more restrictive contract that gives them less and less rights. So the court can also maybe decide that some of those practices, asking for a change in practices, but what if the decision of the court is that they won't change those practices? Then the UFC can continue that, and
Right.
that's 50-50 thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are a ton of people too that the other part of it is that Dana's become more and more of a celebrity where, people like his brash nature and people are, nobody's going to do nothing to Dana, this, that, and the other thing. And when it comes down to jury selection, all you need is a couple of guys on the jury that get through that, you know, yeah, I follow him a little bit, but at the end of the day, they slant and like what he does. And so I'm not confident that the lawsuit is going to work out in favor of big changes. And Dana expanding into other things. All Dana has to do at this point is leave the UFC. He's on the board for Meta. I'm sure that he can get on several other positions of that nature. Where he'll be adding to his fortune. I think that's what's important to him at this point.
Yeah. Now's the time where we should probably mention your favorite thing. Dana, he has a lot of his fingers are in a lot of pies compared to, even just a few years ago when he was just UFC, UFC, UFC. Now he's got your favorite thing, which is Power Slap, and he's got, now he's going to be on this board of directors of Meta. I know he was doing some extreme sports stuff. I don't know what happened with that. It seemed to boxing never went anywhere still. Although there's rumors of him and maybe doing something with the guy in Saudi Arabia, Sheikh Turkey. Um, but yeah, he has his fingers on a lot more things now. Why do you think that is?
I think at some point he broke through into that echelon of guys that are, billionaires or close to billionaires. And if you're close to being a billionaire, there's nothing that you would like more than to actually get billionaire status, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I think is going on there. I think that he hasn't given up on the power slap thing, probably because it really doesn't cost anything to do that.
Hmm.
Like I saw, I saw that they did a everybody in the house kind of reality show for Power Slap, and to be honest with you, the house was noticeably another level up from the Ultimate Fighter houses. It was a mansion and a rich person's house or whatever. But even in a worst case scenario, what can you possibly be paying for that every month? $100,000? It's nothing to him. It's nothing to him. He plays $75,000 hands of blackjack. So literally, if he's um the house might cost $500,000, and that's legitimately six hands of blackjack for Dana. And he's not paying for it out of his own pocket. Like, and then we know from everything we've heard is that the fighters are also, or the fighters, I call them the fighters, the power slap people. See,
Slappers.
see what you make me do. um,
They're going to
but
have an event in Saudi Arabia. I bet you're excited to hear
you know,
that.
here's the thing about it is, and I've seen some of the social media clips. I've seen some of the guys, get slapped and go down. I've seen, you know, women doing it and the whole thing. And at the end of the day, it's boring as hell. It's boring as hell. It's a kind of thing where it's not sustainable as a sport because what do you really think, people are gonna watch that every week, week in, week out? No, it's got a shock value when you see it the first time. And maybe,
Like I'll stop if I see a guy about to get slapped, and if I see him I'll wait and see if he gets knocked out or not. And but it's not like I'm like, oh my god, I gotta see the replay. I just scroll on, you know.
and you get a certain amount of guys. Like for example, I think Mark Coleman, before he started to have some real um some real physical deterioration and wound up in hospital and stuff. But guys like Tim Sylvia thought about trying it. And I think that at the end of the day, those two guys in particular are guys that are not millionaires from the UFC and from their fighting days. So they're doing it for a payday, you know? Um, and that's the end of it, Tim, and I consider Tim to be a guy who's underappreciated in the sport. I've interviewed him I interviewed him with Monty, and he gave us a great interview. He came back to finish it because he had to leave the first time and stuff. So I respect him, and Tim is a guy who's very forthcoming about stuff. But at the end of the day, he has a big old head. You know what I mean? So I think he's going to be fine in that sport. Let him go do it. And let him grab a few paydays and stuff. But it's kind of sad to see. And this is where rather than do power slap, Dana should probably cut some of these guys. Tim Sylvia should probably be in the Hall of Fame. He's a heavyweight champion twice. Um, they resent the way he left the UFC at some point. And obviously, his association with Monty makes it difficult for them to honor him, but he should probably be in the Hall of Fame.
Hmm.
And maybe if the Hall of Fame came with a nice extra check for him, it would help out. know, rather than say, yeah, come and do power slap and we'll cut you some new checks and stuff like that. Yeah. The other part of it is it's brain damage waiting to happen. You know what I mean? It's somebody at some point is not going to be well from being a power slapper or whatever you want to call it, especially if they wind up in a situation where they're doing a lot of uh, competitions or whatever. How many times do you need to be hit in the head like that with no defense before it actually starts to become a problem? And that's what. But at the end, like I said, there's no sustainability to the sport because it's boring to watch. What are you going to do? You can you watch legitimately 15 of those fights or fights again, 15 of those matches, and then sign in the next week and see 15 more and 15 more and 15 more. And watch every show this month or whatever. No, people, it has no legs that way. It has no legs that way. Just as a sports fan, and the fact that Dana doesn't want to admit that or recognize that, maybe Dana's dumb enough that he doesn't even realize that that's the case. But I think Dana's not dumb. I think Dana is used to telling people the way things are, and people follow.
Yeah.
That's what
He's
he's been
definitely
doing all
not
along.
doing power slap to enrich himself because it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, he can't be making any money off of it. Maybe, and here's another thing because of his status and the money he's made is a lot of the times people hang around and stay with something because they've been losing money. Again, I don't think he's a couple of blackjack hands he may have lost, but again, listen to him talk about his strategy in blackjack. If he's down, he stays until he makes his money back. So if Power Slap costs him a couple of bucks, he's going to hang around and stay until he makes his money back. He's not going to lose money on these types of things. That's his mode, the way he operates, in everything. So that could be really the underlying reason is that he lost some money on Power Slap already, and he's going to hang around until somehow it comes back.
It's hard to even, I hear you giving these takes on power slap. It's hard to even believe that we're still giving takes on it. Why do you think it still hasn't got a TV deal?
Because it sucks.
Yeah.
Because it sucks. Keep in mind, you can see fucking log rolling, log cutting, on TV. This is more boring than that. You know what I mean? So, and um,
This is more boring. It's
yeah, to
true.
me,
There is some terrible stuff on TV.
yeah, yeah. So conceivably, the other thing about it is that the people, there hasn't been anybody that does power slap that has even an iota of charisma. Like, that people are going to be like, can you take any of those guys and 'cause like back in the old days, like even like Chuck Liddell isn't exactly the most charismatic guy in the world, but they took him and put him on the talk show circuit, and they were trying to hype this stuff like that. There isn't a single person that does power slap that you could say, Let's get him on morning talk show so that we can help spread the sport.
They do have,
They,
you
they,
know, the Hawaiian guys that they have in it are very moke. I don't know if you know what moke is. Moke is like I'd say like, how can I put it? Kind of like more like hillbilly type of Hawaiian. You know, the ones with the real strong pigeon and all that. They do have a couple of guys like that. That the UFC didn't even have guys like that that talk that way. So they have a couple of guys that do, especially one. That's just how he talks entirely. And I think some people have gravitated towards him. But you're right. They don't. I don't see anybody that's really crossed over that's gained anybody's attention so far, as far as like where it's been like a fire lit real fast.
you said hillbilly, like hillbilly Hawaiian types, which
Hmm.
is a specific kind of
Backwoods locals,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, but that's kind of what I'm going to use a term that's kind of like not polite, but it looks kind of white trash to me.
Yeah.
I mean, and I know that there are football races and stuff like that that do the sport and stuff like that, but in general, it really looks like a trailer park sport. And there's nothing that they've been able to do, putting them in fancy houses in Vegas or putting, big lights there and having, Michael Bisping catching the guys when they fall and stuff like that. There's nothing they've been able to do that takes that feeling away that it's a trailer park sport. They should actually live with that and do it in trailer parks across the country and do a trailer park tour. That might be interesting to some of those people, but trying
You
to
know,
sell it like a real sport has been nothing but a failure. And it's ridiculous.
I'm kind of wondering now if maybe they start Power Slap because they got this Apex. A lot of fans complain that they have a lot of events in the Apex, but I get it. It's cheaper to run the shows there. It's there, but I'm sure when they're not using it or not using it enough, that they're like, we spent all millions on this Apex and we're not even using it. We need to make something else that we can put in here to put on
Again,
something.
well, they signed Musmechi or whatever the kid is. Why not
Micah
do
Mouse
grappling?
Mess, yeah.
Why not do grappling?
They are. They're trying to venture into that.
That's what they should do if they want to keep, the uh, the Apex. Should expand the Apex. The Apex gives them a lot of flexibility and power to do what they want, and it's a good place. Obviously, they made it with a TV product in mind, so where the cameras are positioned and all the shots and stuff like that. It's an appealing venue, but
Yeah,
you
I
you
would.
don't
Why
need.
not build your own arena and your own hotel? I know it would cost a lot of money, but the money will be made back.
Well, yeah, they
I'm
actually,
surprised they didn't go that route in the first place.
yeah,
Because it takes a lot of money to take a show on the road. I was at the show in Dallas. That arena was full, and that was not a cheap hotel either. That was like a
yeah.
200 something dollar a night hotel.
See,
And
but when the UFC comes into town, I'll tell you, we did shows with Bodog, Euphoria, and some of the other promotions in the early 2000s at Trump's Taj Mahal. And like I said, it really depends. For example, it's not a cheap hotel, right? What does the penthouse cost?
oh, I don't know, but
You
just a
know,
regular
so
room was like $235.
okay, so
Nothing
here's the thing: is
over the
if
top.
the UFC rolls into town and people are drawn to the show and the hotel sells out really fast, then the UFC is going to get. They're not going to spend money. They're going to be comped the rooms for the fighters, comped the rooms for the entourage. You know, maybe if it's a big enough, like at the Trump Taj Mahal, it's got thousands of employees working 24/7, right? So, and we were given passes and we'd be there for a week, right? We were given passes and there are these doors, that you can see that the employees go in and out of. And we had passes that we would go through, go on to escalator or anything in the back where the most
Hold
of the
on.
crowd. So a lot of times casinos have maybe a different setup than big hotels, but big hotels also employ thousands of people. So as I was saying, in the back, as you go through those doors that the employees go through and stuff, there's a huge cafeteria and buffet where they feed the thousands of people on the shifts 24/7. You can go back there. And at the end of the day, the fighters, the entourage, maybe you have 100 people more going to this buffet to eat. And they're feeding thousands of employees, the people that clean the rooms, the people that do this and that and the other thing. So um, that's all free. The UFC doesn't pay for that. The UFC doesn't pay, a couple bucks for each head of food and stuff like that. The UFC doesn't pay for the rooms. They get comped for their rooms and stuff because they bring all their with their fans, all the fans booking the rooms and stuff like that, kind of pay for all that. And on top of that, the UFC probably approaches somebody in the what's it called? The Chamber of Commerce or some, I'm not sure exactly what but probably Chamber of Commerce or something along those lines. In every city they hit and get themselves paid. It's good for the city. And Dana's been on record saying this. When they hit a city, the city's economy goes. Not only the hotel they're in, the fans are in, but if they're going to fill an arena up with 20,000 people, that's maybe 10 or 12,000 people throughout the city in other hotels of different levels. So but everybody benefits. Everybody gets a piece of the pie that way. So when they roll in, they don't pay for anything. No. So I think that's kind of the way it works with their economy. So you know when they're in the apex, I think it provides them some efficiencies. But more than anything, I think what Dana wanted was control. You're on mute again. You're on mute again.
Did the fighters pay their own airfare and stuff still, or no? I don't think
I
they
don't
do
think
that.
so. No, I
And
don't think so.
they pay for the rooms though now. No, the fighters, or are they getting comped?
No, I think especially in the UFC, the bottom line is like look in Abu Dhabi, we had to figure out a way for rooms to get paid for, and we did that with a sponsorship. But I think the fighters' contract gives them a certain amount of accommodations. So okay, so at least two plane tickets, them and their corner man, per diem or food
Right.
compensation for each person, and accommodations all in the contract. So the fighters aren't coming out of pocket for that. The UFC certainly is trying to figure out a way to not pay for it, and they don't. I'm convinced that they don't. Like that hotel where they came into um benefit. Like I said, when I was at the Trump Taj Mahal, like I said, they have a huge buffet in the back, and 100 people more eating than they usually have. Doesn't even make a difference. It's a 24/7 buffet for And again, the Trump's a casino also, so it maybe operates a little bit different. But we got the arena free, and we got all the people, like all the tickets, sellers, and all the people that seat you in the arena, security in the arena. All that was free. We didn't pay for any of that. And all my boss really had to do was deliver one high roller, one Russian guy that came in, and the casino was down a couple $1 million to him. So they wanted him back so that they could get their money back. And as long as he promised that that guy would come to the show, we could do whatever we wanted there, you know? And that's why I was talking about like the penthouse suites and stuff like that. They've got penthouse suites that are going to be booked for the week of the UFC by guys like you know throwing $15,000 for a room a night is nothing. Then yeah, it starts to add up. If they have 6 of those rooms, that's 100 times. What is 80 rooms or whatever at $200 compared to those rooms? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, and the UFC has that game down to a T. I'm convinced of that. Because
But the arenas,
it,
that's an issue. Remember, Dana made that comment about the the Madison Square Garden. He said it costs like 100 grand just turn on the lights or something. He had said.
yeah, and some of these places, like even in Vegas, and some of these places are union run. So there's like I got in trouble at the Trump Taj Mahal for we had a room set up for a photo shoot, and there was a banner. It was kind of like misplaced, and it would have been better over here for the lighting and stuff like that. And when we moved the banner, one of the union guys got upset because that's what their job is, and they're taken care of that way. And he went and complained, and did his whole thing. I mean, he was getting paid anyway, but yeah, there are a few hurdles that you have to overcome and stuff. But again, when the UFC, the Fertitas also are in the casino business and stuff, so they know how to comp and how to deal with high roller people and stuff like that. And when you're dealing with Madison Square Garden, you're dealing with an iconic building, right? So you want to make sure that, but again, even if it's $100,000, maybe they went to the Chamber of Commerce or whatever entity in New York and said, look, we're going to bring X amount of money to your economy over the weekend. So help us out with some of these fees and some of these bills that we're going to pay. I'm sure they got sponsorship money and got somebody to help them take care of it. Again, that's what these people do is work out deals. You know what I mean?
That's
And
why
the
they didn't
fact
come
that,
to Hawaii because the Hawaii Tourism Authority said, no, you're going to pay us.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
We don't need you here. You can pay us, or we can get people come here every day to vacation. You can pay us or not. That's the way they
There's
looked
going to
at it.
be, and that's what's going to rule out people. So when they go to a place, you can be sure that there's someone there doing business with them. They're not going to come out of pocket and be like, "Well, we want to do a show in Hawaii, so let's go ahead and pay. We'll do it." That's not the way this works.
Right?
So yeah,
Yeah, the Hawaii Tourism Authority is like, we don't. You can come here or not. It's not going to affect us.
yeah,
Our hotels are full 24/7. 365
yeah,
days a year. We don't care if you come or not. You pay us or you don't come.
yep, for sure, for sure. So we can we talk about Donn Davis now because I'm getting
Yeah, we
ready
can
to.
we can do a little Donn Davis at the end. I know the title will be Dana White to Meta, but yeah, let's talk about a little Donn Davis. I know I sent you some stories about them cutting the $1 million prize to 500K now for 2025, and I also sent you a video where a guy had he had done he had put some time into it to go after Donn Davis, and also I had also sent Miguel a post that Donn Davis had put on LinkedIn of all places, where everybody in MMA hangs out, of course, and not. And, he's complaining about various things. So now that I've laid the groundwork, Miguel, go ahead.
Yeah, he gave his top reasons why the top negative things that happened to him in 2024 or whatever. And the guy is really out of place in MMA. He really has no clue what he's doing. What does he think he's doing in this sport? You know what I mean? Um, and another piece that we saw there was him kind of bad mouthing Bellator fighters. I mean, again, these guys they bought the Bellator roster, right? And then they bought Ngannou, and then they proceeded to do nothing with them. The Ngannou, and I forget what the Brazilian guy they fought when they finally fought in PFL, but they did a pay per view.
Ferreira.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. And what was the end numbers for that pay per view?
No idea.
Somebody in one of the videos said something around 30,000.
Okay.
pay-per-view sales, and that makes sense. When we did our first pay-per-view with Roger Gracie and Ron Waterman as the main event, Eddie Alvarez was on it. Um, one of our Bodog people made the genius move of taking Eddie's fight off the pay-per-view, because of time slots and things like that. Meanwhile, probably, people in Philadelphia, Eddie was a machine for, publicity and selling tickets and stuff in his hometown on a grassroots level. But that probably was like half the audience. You know what I mean? So stupid shit like that. But we did about 15,000 pay-per-views. So I'm not surprised that maybe they doubled it for their first pay-per-view to 30. Um, because the market's bigger and people are there, and you had Ngannou, which is bigger name than Roger or Ron Waterman, obviously. But that's pathetic. That's pathetic. A 30,000, pay-per-view. That's enough for you to probably have to pay the pay-per-view company out of pocket because you didn't meet whatever minimum they put on their contract. Because they're going to ask you for a certain amount of sales, or if not, they could just put, freaking roller derby on there and probably get more people to watch it than 30,000. You know what I mean?
Why
So
are they not doing anything with these guys? Because Jucal, remember we talked to Jucal, and he said Douglas Lima's not getting any fights either.
yeah,
Why did they buy this entity, which has some talented fighters, and not
yeah, yeah.
use them?
Because the video that you sent me about, Greasy Don, as he called him, is at the end of the day, Donn Davis doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know what he's doing. He may have some success in some other businesses, and he's rich and stuff like that. So people are going to say, think, but that doesn't give him any credibility or ability to handle this type of sport. He has never known what he's doing since the very beginning of the TFL. He has shown that on a consistent basis every single time, day in, day out. From telling me, telling you, telling the crowd. First of all, when they bought Bellator, denying it for months and months and months, as you so astutely pointed out, to coming signing Ngannou after Ngannou, left the UFC and his negotiations with one fell apart. So they you know, had the credo or the credentials of having actually signed Ngannou, right?
Mhm.
And then saying we are going to announce his fight next week, and then nothing, crickets for weeks and months, letting him box twice,
But they
letting
got
him not.
fight people in this business. They race FOs with them. They got people that know, well, yeah, we got some good fighters that we got. Maybe we should put them into our product. So something's going on. What is it? That's a question.
Ray Sefo is a fighter.
Right, but obviously he would want to see some of the better Bellator guys in the PFL, would he not? You would think so.
Here's a question: Joe Silva, Dana White, anybody in the management of UFC from the very beginning. Like what's going to happen when they leave? Do you think that Hunter's going to take over, or do you think that Connor is going to take over? At what point does being a fighter make you qualified to actually run a business?
Right, but what I'm saying is, why buy the show if you're not going to use the athletes? Just let it die. It wasn't doing well anyway.
Yeah, no,
Bellator was about to die on its own.
because you're dumb. Because you're
I
stupid.
don't believe that he would buy that show and say, you know what, all the best fighters are not welcome. We're just going to let them die over here, and maybe the
Yeah,
event will go. Maybe they
he
just
he
bought it to let it die or let the contracts run out.
he said in one of the quotes he said he's sorry that the Bellator fighters aren't getting fights, but that business decisions are being made for the benefit of all their fighters, right?
Right. I
And
think what
that's
they're
not
doing
the
is maybe they're waiting for the Bellator contracts to run out, and now they'll say, okay, now we'll renegotiate with you, or you can go elsewhere.
I think probably a move. Like I said, I think what's happening here is he bought Bellator to move. He got Ngannou at a point where he was also on the other side doing what Donn Davis supposedly probably does uh, with some acumen, and that is fundraise. He needed the credentials of saying, well, we just bought Bellator, we just did this, so he gets to go to Qatar and fleets them for another 100,000 or $100 million. So now he's got operating costs, and now he can say, well, I can, of that 100 million, I deserve 25 million in salary. And I think that's what's going on there, is that it was for fundraising purposes only. It was to get investors to think that they were doing something with the product. Meanwhile, he had no plan. He doesn't watch the sport. He doesn't know what he's doing. Again, the PFL's format now they're actually, the one thing they had was the $1 million contract. The $1 million tournament winners, right? And they just that, right? Why is that? Because I think nothing in their performance is going to mean that they're going to be able to get the funding that they got already. So the funding's going to go down, and that's how this thing will die. But he's leading it to death. This is a death march that the PFL is on, because there's nothing going on there. Again, how can you have a league that says, well, these are the weight classes that we're going to do this year? But what about the fighters in the other weight classes that you're not going to do this year? They don't get any fights, and that's literally what's happened. On
But
top of that, they buy.
I don't believe that they would buy the show and not realize that, if we bring some of these guys in who already have a fan base from their competition in Bellator, and some of them in the UFC too, that we're going to get some new people to watch our show. I don't believe that they
I,
don't
I,
know that.
I
I
don't.
don't
I
believe
don't
that.
think. I don't think he cares at all about people watching the show. What he cares about is being able to fundraise and go out and get investors to invest. And that's what the Bellator thing was. It was a smoke and mirrors move, so
Mm-hmm.
that he can say, we've got Bellator and we're doing big things.
Yeah, he brought up that statistic. Now we have almost the same percentage of top 20 fighters as the UFC. I forgot what it was, but he was saying their percentage is relatively close to what UFC's percentage is.
Yeah.
The top 20 fighters in the world at every weight class. So maybe that's what he was doing, like you're saying. Maybe he used that as a way to fundraise by saying, now we have.
Yeah. We we and we're doing big things. Who knows what they paid for Bellator too? So maybe they got Bellator on a discount, or
Yeah.
off the shelf, with sale price or whatever, as Viacom or whoever owned Bellator before wanted to get out of the business, and um, it looked good at the moment. There was a glimmer of hope, and again, they went Qatar or Saudi Arabia or those places, raised big money with Ngannou, with Bellator, and then they proceeded to actually take the money, the investor money, and then do nothing with those assets. Because the goal wasn't like, okay, now we got Bellator, now what do we do with them? Now we do shows every week. Now we do this. Now we gotta get everybody active. Now let's get a real matchmaker together to sit and put together, what are good fights. They did a couple of shows. They burnt off a couple of, maybe, critical assets that they had. Maybe there were some contracts they were obligated to fill, but they probably failed most of the contracts that they inherited in that buy, because they don't care, because he has no plan. He's not a person that understands the sport in any way, shape, or form. All he cares about is being able to go get money from people.
But eventually you have to deliver.
Once the money's in the account, yeah, if you're going to go, I think the money's big enough that he's probably satisfied.
No,
And
I mean,
maybe
eventually that'll run out and you have to get more. And if you're not delivering, no one's going to give
no,
it to
he's
you.
not going to get more. That's
Yeah,
that's the
no one's
thing,
going to
is
give it to you.
those fundraising days are over for
Yeah.
PFL, and I think that's where, but I think that's what you saw there, was those were fundraising moves. Ngannou, Bellator's purchase was around the time where he also had to go to Qatar or wherever. I think Qatar is the name that was tossed around with him. Um,
It makes
to
sense.
ask for more money.
It makes
That's
sense.
but then he comes back and again, he goes off for months at a time on LinkedIn. He'll do a post or two or whatever, but he's not even working
Yeah.
on it. Like that's it. That's the one thing there that if you're not ready to put the energy that Dana White did, because you can love Dana or hate Dana, but you cannot deny that the guy was at 24/7 working on this. Like you said, now he seems to be in meta and doing other things and stuff like that. But for a good 10 or 15 years, the guy lived and breathed every second for his company and worked on it. Again, whether you like the direction he took things or not, and you can agree with some moves and some not, but the guy was tireless. The guy was a guy who put every ounce of that into it. You could even crushing competition and even things like that. The guy was diabolical, but wasn't like you never ever ever had a moment where it's like, yeah, I wonder what Dana's doing. And that's literally been the case for years now with Donn Davis. Like literally, what is Donn Davis doing?
Yeah, and I don't even see guys like Ray Sefo are part of this company, in the public sphere.
Again, there are no, you don't
I
have
saw him
fighters.
comment once. He did a press conference I showed you where he was he didn't deny what I had put out, but that was the only time I'd seen him do a press conference at all.
You don't have fight. Ray Sefo being a part of their management again may have been actually like a fundraising move. To get a recognizable name. Ray's a kickboxer too. He's not even an MMA person.
Yeah.
And how many you don't have former fighters in executive. I mean, and when you do, for example, like look at Dana and how he shits, literally shits on Oscar De La Hoya. De La Hoya might be the example of a guy in the executive position who was also a fighter,
Hmm.
right? And I mean, De La Hoya's got success and stuff like that, but there are not people like
Yeah.
in those positions when they get if they get lucky, they get a TV like commentator position like a Bisping or some of those guys. But there's nobody in an office suite handling, that's a former fighter. And if they come up at some point, we'll see. Some of the guys could probably do it. I'm sure more of the guys think they could. But at the end of the day, it takes a lot to do what Dana's done. Dana is you can't Dana's unmatchable in terms of the energy he put into this stuff. And I spent 10 years getting our companies going to a certain level and stuff like that. So I have an idea of what it takes. And I failed at the end of the day. It's like I have to admit that. Um, but yeah, Donn Davis can't hold a candle to the amount of energy and stuff that I put into it.
Right. You always talk about that. And I've told people that too, because really you don't hear fans bring this up. But really, at the end of the day, all it comes down to is how long are you willing to lose money? Or in his case, how long are his investors willing because he's not putting up his own? And do you have the passion to see it through? And Donn Davis doesn't. That's clear.
Yeah, Don made a rich man's decision as to what he was going to invest in next, and MMA was hot, and the product was available because I guess this is the old World Series of fighting. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think that was available, probably also for cheap. And he went around to some of his friends and people and probably put together the money to get that. Came up with this PFL concept, which is flawed from the beginning, and we've talked about that over and over again. This is why you don't even see Dana addressing them with competition.
Well, let me ask you this. Don't they have some obligation to their investors, or they just get to take their money and run?
I'm sure that you know from my
I would
contact
think they
with,
have obligation, or am
yeah,
I wrong?
from my contact, the Arabs that have money and oil money and stuff like that are not dumb.
Right.
They will have um you know criteria, and maybe even have, you'll get some of the money, and then you, once you meet this, you get some of the other money, and and they'll have a structure that way. But at the end of the day, is what speculating, what I think is that Donn Davis failed at meeting whatever criteria. So yeah, he probably got a heavy-ended, you know, handout of money because they hadn't gone to, because they were doing big things and this, that, the other stuff. They're going to do PFL Africa, and they're going to be the first. All this sort of stuff. So he convinced him, and maybe, but like I said, his next uh, fundraising tour that he does will not result in the money that he got the first time around, or the first and second time around. If he got some investment money first, and then he said, we're going to need some help. We're going to sign Ngannou, and we're going to buy Bellator. And we're like, okay, it sounds like they've got a plan. But again, his follow through. So you can take money and fail, and that's what this guy's done. He's an utter failure.
Right. But I would think that you'd have some obligation, or at least that the investors, if they're smart, would have some people with some eyes on the event saying, "Look, you aren't doing anything with what you purchased. You aren't doing
Yeah,
anything with Ngannou. We're
I
not
think I think
satisfied
well,
with the money
but I
we
think
gave."
no, and I think he's probably heard that, or at
Yeah.
least is going to get the cold shoulder the next time he asks for money. But I don't think, again, in those cases, I think in the Arab world, and this is more a little bit of speculation, but keep in mind, with my time in Abu Dhabi and working with the Abu Dhabi tournament directly for many years, and I did it for 8 years. I think that few of them are passionate about the sport, actually. Then I think that there are a few the others that are sort of competing with each other, but that you certainly get to a point where this is just another investment. You know, uh, the Saudi Arabia crown prince. I think he's young and hip enough that he might like fights and stuff like that, but I don't think he trains. And the Qataris, I think, it's strictly a money investment, where they were told the UFC is making all kinds of money and stuff like that. You haven't seen an event in Qatar. You haven't seen um, anything but them giving money. And I think, this is one of those things where they're going to have to say, hey, it's a write off. That was a bad idea.
Yeah. That's crazy that I would think, and I'm not privy to this stuff. That's why I bring you on here to educate people, and me for that matter. Um, like if I invested X into this event, and I see that they're not doing anything with the things they purchased or whatever, or the things they sold me on. I mean, I would think they would ask for some of the money back.
A lot of that stuff may be agreed upon. And that's where, Greasy Dawn may have, you don't know what went on in the back rooms and stuff like that, but they may have been convinced in some way, shape, or form that this was a can't miss. UFC is making all kinds of money. The Saudi Arabians are becoming involved in fights. The UAE has a lot of UFC events, and they've become a destination there, and there are people there, and they're all competing with each other. So Qatar wanted to get involved in that. So maybe they didn't cut themselves a deal they normally do. But I have a friend who actually created a phone app that was supposed to be for fighters, like a fighter social media app where you could, and promoters and all kinds of people are involved, managers and things like that, and everybody's got social media presence, and you can interact on there, including to the point of negotiating things like that. So he made a pretty complete application on the phone, um, with money from Abu Dhabi, with money from one of the sheiks in Abu Dhabi. And I know what they put him through for fundraising. And, at some point, just developing the application and getting it out there, they went through the first wave of money, and then he had to do a very detailed and very uh you know uh, it had levels and stuff to get more money out of them so that they could go ahead and advertise this thing and get it out there and stuff like that. So like I said, these guys do put full, they don't just give money away.
Did
Those days,
that app ever come out?
yeah, it's out there now. You can download it. It's called Fight Scout.
Oh,
I don't think, um
Millions is kind of like that. It's something for athletes, but now creators can get in on it too. That I was
yeah,
telling you about.
I think Fight Scout is now connected to bare knuckle fighting.
Hmm.
But I think that, um yeah, I think they have a long I think they're behind on, if they had come out 10 years ago, I think that they might have actually had a chance. But I think once you get to the UFC, and if they're a fight game kind of thing and you're not working with the UFC, then it doesn't matter. No, you're only a periphery job, you know what I mean? But they have good programming and an A for effort, but they have fake fighters and fighters from all over the world, that are not of a high level, and you can make up, I'm a fighter. I can put myself in there as a fighter. You know what I mean? That's what social media is about. A lot of people that, so I think that their idea gets an A for effort. But I don't think it's super viable. I gave the name out there. People can go look at it and download it and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, what the point of it was that my experience with helping that friend of mine launch that application, um, showed me what it takes to actually get funds out of the Arabs. Like I say, it's not like, hey, here's money. You know what I mean? And maybe, like I said, Donn Davis at some point, probably because he's operated at a high level and he's got money and stuff like that, he could probably make a decent enough presentation with smoke and mirrors that convinced people that he was the next big thing in the sport. And I think Ngannou was a big factor for him, and that's why he sunk, a lot of money into Ngannou's fights. And that's why I think he was not shy about letting Ngannou go make money with other companies and stuff like that, because it saves him money.
Yeah, and he really had no intention to carry out what he was going to do with them, probably.
Yeah, like I said,
PFL
you know,
Africa 2025. He even
I
said that
think,
in his little spiel. We saw that on the video, right, where he's saying, our expansion is costing us more than we thought it would.
yeah, again,
Really? You weren't
and
prepared for that? Yeah.
and the expansion was in Europe with a bunch of European guys, where the European they dropped the tournaments down to 500,000, right? But the European tournaments actually made 100,000 at the end of the day. So
Yeah.
if you're not making money back on those types of discount prices where you're getting three fights out of a guy, and then at the end of the day, they may make whatever for the three fights as a fee, and then you get $100,000 bonus at the end. Maybe they took home 200,000 for three fights. The UFC doesn't even blink with that kind of money coming in. You should be able to make your money back if you've done anything to get on TV, to get sponsors, to get, you know, proper company building. But again, they don't have anything close. So again, the most telling thing about the PFL now is that Dana doesn't even care what they do.
Yeah.
Maybe when they got maybe on his radar a little bit with Ngannou, but then everything they've done with Ngannou since, they, Dana doesn't care. When Dana went after other companies like Strike Force and in the old days and stuff like that, it's because he felt that he couldn't let them stay there because maybe there's something there, maybe there are competition, and he needed what they had also. He doesn't
He
need
and Bjorn too.
anything.
You know, he went off on Bjorn a few times
Yeah, yeah.
because Redney knew what he was doing.
Bellator at the start had a trajectory where they were scaling up.
Yep.
They went from ESPN, Kino, or whatever it was,
Yep.
to other channels and other outlets and stuff like that. Like I said, but what killed him was the Eddie Alvarez situation, and that to me was unfortunate because other than that, maybe they could still be the second company if he had stayed along. But he bailed out. They gave it to Coker, who Coker's not a guy who's got the energy that is needed for this. Like I said, you need a Dana type personality
Hmm.
to push something like this. Coker wasn't the guy, and that's why they stagnated and had their moments and ups and downs and stuff like that. But they became not competition for the UFC, and the UFC stopped worrying about them. Maybe again, signing old UFC fighters isn't it's a dead end. you know. And again, now Dana doesn't even. This is tantamount to like if I talk to my dogs, but if I see a worm on the floor, I don't talk to the worm like, "Hey, out of here, move." You know what I mean? It's that far beneath me, and that's what the PFL is to Dana. It's so far beneath him that he doesn't even register their presence anymore, and that should tell you everything you need to know about the PFL.
So PFL's a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, PFL, yeah, but again, if Donn Davis' bank account was staying the same, or whatever, I think he's some of the money being invested, he's taken as a salary, and I'm sure he's not making 5,000 a month.
Right.
So I'm sure if he got 100 million, he probably pocketed 25 as chief executive officer type salary, and then the rest, 75 million, you can operate what they've done in the last year or so. You could easily do for 75 million. There's nothing that impressive. $100,000 contracts in Europe, a couple of $1 million contracts in the U.S. in four weight classes, so that's $4 million at the end for bonuses and stuff. Where some people have actually complained that they didn't pay on time and they were late in paying and stuff like that. So, but there's nothing there. The rumor was that he got $100 million investment. Do you see $100 million worth of product? Yeah. So that's the case. He's enriched himself, and that's all he's done.
That's
He's done.
sad.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is. It is. It's actually almost criminal.
Yeah, it makes sense though. Everything you're saying makes sense because they really haven't done anything, and it's almost like it's being run by a 2-year-old. Like,
If you're Douglas Lima or one of the old Bellator fighters that hasn't gotten the fights that he deserves, again, when John Jones doesn't fight for years or whatever, we always, but that's John's choice, right? But we lament that these guys they don't fight till they're 65 and then retire. Right? They can fight. There's a very limited shelf life. So when you've got healthy guys that want to fight and they're not fighting, you're actually really affecting them, their family, their income, everything about them. That's why, you know, criminal might be the right word for it because every one of those guys is sitting there on hold. They're, how are they making money? They have to go off and go side job, you know. Some of them may have gyms, some of them may do personal training. Some of them on the roster may have to actually go do construction and do other work and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that because he's not honoring their contracts.
Yeah.
And then he says it's for the good of all of them. And yeah, you know, for the good of all the fighters, I think if you read between the lines, all he needs to do, he wants to do is really for the good of all the fighters. It's like keep the PFL name go, keep it going, so that he can also make money, but keep it going so that because if it collapses, everybody suffers, including PFL fighters, Bellator fighters, and stuff like that. It's going to collapse, right? But I think that's the only interpretation I have of when he says for the good of all the fighters is keep it going, keep it going. For the good of Donn Davis is what he won't say because he's not that stupid. I mean, he's obviously stupid, but he's not that stupid.
Yeah. I think it's a great thing to end on. It's a great ending quote. He's stupid, but he's not that stupid.
He's out for himself. Well, Dana's obviously out for himself too, but Dana carried the whole company with him. And this guy is not even carrying anything. He's just in it for himself.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I think you said a lot of interesting stuff there because I wasn't thinking about that. Just the raising of money. I haven't seen many people say that. So, yeah, I think
What else could it be with the evidence we have?
yeah, sad, sad.
Yeah, like I said, if he called me, I'll take some of his money, and we'll see how long. If he doesn't listen to me, then I'll take his money until it collapses, and he'll go away, and I'll be part of another failed company.
I don't think he'd
But
call you given what you said about him.
yeah, and I'm okay with that. I'm not asking for a job, and at this point, I'm old and tired to go through that grind. And like I said, I don't have the energy of Dana. Um, so yeah, but could I could I do weekly shows and match make a roster of 400 people? Yeah, it could be done. It could be done easily, but he's not even trying. That's the shameful part. Is he's not even trying.
Yeah, yeah. I think your theory is probably right on.
So we'll see.
You think they make it through 2025?
I think, like I said, if they got $100 million, that last wave of investment, we have not seen them spend enough in 2024 for them to be through all that money, and not even close. So they may have another year with them. But again, if what they present, and again, remember at the beginning of 2024, at the beginning, it probably took them till like February before you even saw them update their website. So who knows when we're going to get an actual schedule out of them and where the tournaments will be and what weight classes. But if they go with the exact same formula, then probably 2025 will be the last year.
Yeah. Well, Miguel, as always, I think that, like I said, that's great to end on. This topic, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens. There's been some other interesting new stuff that maybe we cover in the future, but for everyone that supports this show, like I said at the beginning, subscribe, like the episode to get more people to see it, and we appreciate you watching it. We like doing this stuff, and you know, as always, till next time, we'll see you again.